In the idyllic town of Crestwood, the Hayes family was everything you'd expect: successful, admired, and tightly knit. But one choice, one betrayal, turned their perfect world upside down. This wasn't just a story about love and trust. It was about how far people will go to protect what they cannot bear to lose. Jonathan Hayes was the proud father, the rock of the family. His wife Martha was his equal in every way, and their daughter Lila was the light of their lives. Together they painted a picture of harmony in a town where everyone knew everyone else. But even the most perfect portraits can hide cracks beneath the surface. Lila was young, vibrant, and deeply in love with Adam Carter, a man who seemed to have it all: charm, ambition, and a bright future. Their love story was something straight out of a romance novel. To those on the outside looking in, the Hayes family was blessed. But no one in Crestwood could have imagined what was happening behind closed doors. No one could have guessed the secret that would tear them apart. What do we do when the people we trust the most betray us in unimaginable ways? How do we reconcile love with the lies that threaten to destroy everything? For the Hayes family, these questions became their reality. This story is about the decisions we make, the secrets we keep, and the devastating consequences when everything comes crashing down. Before we take you through this shocking and heart-wrenching tale, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories that explore the rawest human emotions: love, betrayal, and heartbreak. As you watch, keep asking yourself, how well do you really know the people closest to you? Because, as this story will reveal, sometimes the ones we trust the most are the ones capable of breaking us entirely. In the quiet, picturesque town of Crestwood, few names commanded as much respect as Jonathan Hayes. As an architect with a flourishing career, Jonathan wasn't just designing homes, he was building the very foundation of his community. His innovative projects dotted the town, each structure reflecting the care and precision he was known for. Married to Martha Hayes, a celebrated interior designer, the two made an enviable team. They weren't just partners in work, but in life, a couple who seemed to have it all. Together they raised their only child, Lila, in a home filled with warmth, success, and undeniable love. Jonathan was the definition of a devoted father, the kind who attended every recital, cheered the loudest at soccer games, and made breakfast every Sunday morning without fail. To those who knew him, Jonathan was the quintessential family man: calm, dependable, and always willing to lend a hand. He was the first to volunteer for neighborhood events, and a guiding voice in Crestwood's planning committee. His image was one of integrity, a man admired by all and envied by many. But even a man as revered as Jonathan had a side no one else could see, a part of him that he kept locked away, hidden beneath the life he had so carefully built. Lila Hayes was the epitome of vibrance and ambition. At 22, her passion for art had already earned her a small but loyal following. Whether she was sketching in the park or creating bold, thought-provoking pieces for her college exhibitions, Lila's talent was undeniable. Her free-spirited nature made her a beacon of light in the Hayes household. It was at a university networking event where Lila met Adam Carter, a 24-year-old law student with an air of confidence that turned heads wherever he went. Adam was everything Lila had ever dreamed of: charming, intelligent, and endlessly attentive. He didn't just listen when she spoke about her art, he seemed to genuinely admire her creativity. The two quickly became inseparable. Their relationship blossomed in a way that felt almost too perfect. Adam would surprise Lila with late-night coffee dates, handwritten notes slipped into her bag, and the kind of unwavering support that made her feel unstoppable. Lila's Instagram feed soon became a gallery of their love, a mix of candid photos, heartfelt captions, and snapshots of Adam holding her hand or gazing at her as if she was the center of his universe. Lila called him her soulmate, a word she didn't use lightly. To her, Adam was more than a boyfriend. He was the future she had always envisioned. People in Crestwood couldn't stop talking about Lila and Adam's relationship. They were young, ambitious, and full of promise, a couple so picture-perfect that friends joked they should be on the cover of a magazine. Their love story was the kind that made others believe in soulmates, the kind that seemed destined for a happily ever after. The Hayes family wasn't just admired, they were idolized. Their lives appeared flawless, untouched by the chaos that plagued others. No one in Crestwood would have ever suspected that their perfect family was a fragile facade that would soon crumble in the most shocking way imaginable. But appearances can be deceiving, and in the Hayes household, one secret was quietly unraveling the family from the inside out. Jonathan, Martha, Leela, and Adam were the golden quartet of Crestwood. But how much do we really know about the lives of others, even the ones who seem to have it all? As this story unfolds, you'll discover the choices and betrayals that shattered their perfect image and ended in unthinkable tragedy. Jonathan Hayes had always been the embodiment of control and decorum, his life constructed with precision and care. A respected architect, a loving husband, and a doting father, he had mastered the art of appearing perfect to the world. But underneath that composed exterior, Jonathan carried a secret that weighed on him every day of his adult life. For decades, he had suppressed his true desires, an attraction to men that began in his youth, a part of him he could never embrace, let alone reveal. Jonathan's upbringing in a conservative household shaped his understanding of right and wrong. He had always lived by the rulebook, kept his desires hidden deep inside, and buried any thoughts of his truth beneath the surface of his family's expectations. He was a man of reputation, respected in his community, and that reputation mattered more to him. It was in a dimly lit private club in Redcliffe, a city just over an hour away from Crestwood, that Jonathan first met Adam Carter. Adam was charismatic, fearless, and something Jonathan couldn't resist. Their chemistry was electric the moment their eyes locked across the crowded room. Adam was everything Jonathan had never allowed himself to want. Yet there he was, unabashedly himself, so open in his skin. The affair that followed was brief but intense. They met in secret, hidden from the prying eyes of Crestwood. The stolen moments between them were charged with raw emotion, passion, lust, but also a deep connection neither man expected. They shared intimate conversations, quiet dinners, and hotel rooms that felt like an escape from the constraints of their lives. For Jonathan, it was as if the weight of the world had been lifted, even if only for a few stolen hours. But, as quickly as it had begun, the affair ended when Adam started dating Leela, Jonathan's own daughter. Jonathan told himself that this was for the best, and that he had to step back for the sake of his family. But even as he tried to push Adam out of his life, the feelings didn't fade. They lingered in the quiet corners of his mind, gnawing at him. How could he walk away from the only person who had made him feel truly seen? And why did that connection feel more real than anything else in his carefully controlled life? Months passed, but the connection between Jonathan and Adam was never truly severed. It was subtle at first, small, fleeting moments of eye contact during family dinners, a hand brushing too close during an innocent handshake. Then, one evening, when Jonathan and Adam found themselves alone after a dinner party at the Hayes' home, the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. What started as an innocent exchange of words escalated into something much more dangerous, a kiss, desperate and full of longing, marking the beginning of a secret relationship that would threaten everything Jonathan had built. Jonathan knew this was wrong, so wrong that every part of his mind screamed at him to stop, to walk away from this dangerous path. But he couldn't. Adam was persistent and relentless in his pursuit, and Jonathan, despite his guilt, couldn't escape the craving that burned inside him. Their meetings became more frequent, always in places they thought no one could find them, in hotel rooms far from Crestwood, in the back corners of dimly lit bars, and in remote cabins where they could pretend the world didn't exist. But it wasn't just physical. There was something deeper between them, something more profound than either man was willing to admit. For Jonathan, it was a yearning for something he had spent his entire life denying. For Adam, it was the thrill of a forbidden love, a love that, despite the odds, felt like the truest thing he had ever known. Every stolen moment was like a drug to Jonathan, and the guilt of betraying his wife Martha and daughter Lila gnawed at him every night. He had built a life around his family, a life he was supposed to protect, yet here he was, slowly unraveling everything. He couldn't bear the thought of what would happen if his secret came to light, the shame, the loss, the destruction. Yet he was torn between the life he had built and the desires he had long buried. As the months wore on, the weight of their secret grew heavier. Adam, though seemingly patient, began to show signs of restlessness. The affair was a constant burden on both of them, but especially Jonathan. Adam, never one to shy away from his desires, began pressuring Jonathan to be more open about their relationship. He made it clear that he loved Jonathan, that he wanted to build a future together, even if it meant betraying Lila's trust. But Jonathan, gripped by fear and guilt, was unable to give in. "I can't keep doing this, Adam," Jonathan would say in hushed tones during their late-night meetings. "I have a family. If this ever comes out, it will ruin everything." Adam would listen, his face a mix of frustration and longing. "Jonathan, I'm not asking you to destroy your life," he would reply, his hand reaching for Jonathan's. "I just want you to live honestly, with me." But honesty was a luxury Jonathan couldn't afford. He had a reputation to protect, a family to uphold, and the life of a man who had everything to lose. Yet, the pressure from Adam only intensified. The man he had once kept at arm's length had worked his way into his heart, and now he couldn't escape him. The tension between them started to unravel Jonathan's carefully constructed life. His work, his relationship with Martha, and even his bond with Lila began to show cracks. His mind was always elsewhere, his thoughts constantly consumed by Adam. The nights grew longer, the guilt more unbearable, and Jonathan found himself on the edge of a precipice. Could he continue living this double life, knowing the consequences? Or would it all come crashing down in a way no one could ever predict? What happens when a secret that should have stayed buried begins to consume everything in its path? Jonathan's world was carefully built, but one forbidden affair had begun to erode it all. And Adam? He was no longer just a temptation, he was a ticking time bomb, and Jonathan was about to find out how much he was willing to sacrifice to keep his family together. The stakes were higher than ever, and the consequences devastating. For weeks, Lila Hayes had been feeling a shift in the air around her, like an invisible tension she couldn't quite place. It started with small things. Adam, her confident, loving boyfriend, began to act strangely. He was no longer the attentive partner who would text her throughout the day or surprise her with late-night dinners. Instead, he seemed distant, distracted, like he was always somewhere else. Even when he was right next to her, his phone, once left casually on the table, was now guarded, face down, as if he were hiding something. Lila noticed the late nights too. Adam would excuse himself to study for hours on end, but when she tried to call or text, he often didn't pick up. And when he did, his voice sounded off, as though he were rushing, distracted, always somewhere he couldn't quite reveal. At first, Lila thought it was just stress. Law school wasn't easy after all. But the more she thought about it, the more her gut told her something was wrong. It wasn't just Adam, though. Jonathan, her father, had also been acting differently. He was less present at family dinners, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by an unusual quietness. And when she caught the two of them exchanging brief, awkward glances during dinner, she could feel a coldness hanging in the air between her father and her boyfriend. It was subtle, but it was there. A weird, uncomfortable energy that no one acknowledged, but everyone could feel. Confused and increasingly unsettled, Lila turned to her mother, Martha. She needed answers, or at least someone to talk to, but when she mentioned her concerns about Adam's behavior, Martha brushed it off casually. "Sweetheart, he's probably just stressed out with school. You know how intense law exams can be." "Don't worry too much," Martha said, the reassuring smile on her face barely masking the concern in her voice. Lila tried to accept it, but a deep sense of dread lingered. Something wasn't adding up, and she wasn't sure if she could trust her own feelings anymore. A few days later, the tension reached a breaking point. Lila was coming home from a late-night study session when she found a small, folded note slipped under her apartment door. It wasn't signed, and it wasn't a letter from a friend. It was a cryptic warning that made Lila's heart skip a beat. The note read, "Your boyfriend isn't who you think he is. Ask your father." Lila stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Who would leave this? And what did it mean? Panic started to pulse through her veins as she tried to make sense of the words. Could this be some sort of twisted prank? Or was it a message from someone who knew something she didn't? Lila's hands trembled as she reread the note over and over again, but no answers emerged. Only more questions. Was this a warning? A truth she wasn't ready to face? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and it wasn't just her imagination. Unable to shake her suspicions, Lila decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't live in the dark any longer. She had to know the truth, and she couldn't rely on anyone else to give it to her. The opportunity came one afternoon when she noticed Adam leaving the house, his movements hurried, as though he were trying to escape. Lila's pulse quickened as she grabbed her coat and followed him, keeping a safe distance so he wouldn't notice. Adam led her to a remote park on the outskirts of Crestwood, a place where people rarely went. It was eerily quiet, the trees casting long shadows as the sun began to set. Lila's heart raced as she crept closer, not sure what she was about to uncover. Then she saw them. Adam and Jonathan were standing by a bench, their bodies close together, their voices rising in an argument. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she heard the words they exchanged. Angry, hurt, desperate. "I can't keep doing this, Jonathan," Adam said, his voice tight with emotion. "You have to make a choice. I can't keep pretending like this isn't real. I can't keep hiding from her." Jonathan's voice was low, strained, as if he were holding back a tidal wave of emotions. "You know I can't do that. Not now. Not with everything at stake." The air felt thick with tension, as if every word they spoke was another thread pulling tighter, threatening to snap. But then, everything changed in an instant. Without warning, Jonathan reached out, cupping Adam's face with both hands. Adam looked at him for a long moment, his expression softening, and then they kissed. It wasn't the kiss of two people pretending to be friends or colleagues. It was a kiss full of raw emotion, desperation, and something deeper than either of them could deny. Lila froze, her heart scattering in her chest. She watched in stunned silence as the man she loved, the man she trusted, kissed her father. The shock and betrayal that coursed through her was unbearable. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, as her entire world crumbled before her eyes. Tears blurred her vision, and without a word, Lila turned and fled, running as fast as her legs could carry her. She needed to get away from them, away from the unbearable truth she had just discovered. But as she ran, her mind was in a state of chaos, the faces of both Adam and Jonathan haunting her every step. How could this have happened? She didn't confront them. She couldn't. All she could do was escape as her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, the weight of her discovery threatening to crush her. The Hayes household, once a place of warmth and love, had turned into a battlefield. Lila stormed into the living room, her face a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Her voice cracked as she yelled, "Dad, how could you? How could you betray all of us like this?" Jonathan, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, didn't respond right away. He knew what was coming. He had rehearsed this moment in his head 1,000 times, and yet nothing could prepare him for the devastation in his daughter's voice. Martha, who was upstairs, heard the shouting and rushed down, worry etched across her face. "What's going on? Lila, why are you yelling?" she asked, looking between her husband and daughter. Lila's breathing quickened as she turned to face her mother. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "Mom, he's been sleeping with Adam, my boyfriend." The words cut through the air like a blade. Martha's face froze in disbelief. "What? That's impossible. Lila, what are you saying?" "I saw them," Lila said, her voice breaking. "At the park. They were kissing. All those late-night meetings, those weird looks between them. It all makes sense now. He's been lying to us this whole time." Martha turned to Jonathan, her face pale and her voice shaking. "Tell me this isn't true, Jonathan. Tell me she's lying." Jonathan stood up slowly, his eyes brimming with guilt. I never meant for this to happen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Martha's hand shot to her chest as if the confession physically wounded her. "You never meant for this to happen?" she screamed. "We've been married for 25 years, Jonathan. You were supposed to be my partner, my rock, and this is what you've been hiding?" Jonathan tried to explain, but the words got stuck in his throat. Lila's sobs grew louder as she shouted, "I trusted you, both of you, and you destroyed everything." The weight of the revelation was too much for Martha, who who stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Lila followed, tears streaming down her face, leaving Jonathan alone with his shame. Adam's desperation. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from the confrontation left Jonathan isolated. Martha barely spoke to him, and Lila refused to come home. The once close family was now fractured beyond recognition. Adam, too, was spiraling. His relationship with Lila had ended abruptly, and Jonathan had cut off all contact. The walls were closing in on him, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing everything he cared about. Late one night, Jonathan's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Adam. "Jonathan, please," Adam said, his voice shaky and desperate. "You can't just shut me out. I need to see you. I need to explain." "There's nothing left to explain, Adam," Jonathan replied, his voice cold. "This has to end. I've already destroyed my family because of this. It's over." "No, it's not," Adam snapped. His tone shifted, anger and desperation seeping into his words. "You don't get to walk away like this. You promised me we'd figure this out together. You said you cared about me." Jonathan sighed, exhaustion and guilt weighing on him. "Meet me at the park tomorrow night. We'll talk one last time." The park was eerily quiet that night, the only sounds coming from the rustling leaves and the occasional chirp of crickets. Jonathan arrived first, his breath visible in the cold night air. He stood under a flickering street lamp, his heart pounding in his chest. Adam appeared moments later, his face gaunt and his movements erratic. He looked like a man on the edge, and Jonathan could feel the tension radiating off him. "You didn't have to cut me off like that," Adam said, his voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I've lost Lila, I've lost my future, and now you're throwing me away like I meant nothing to you." "You need to calm down, Adam," Jonathan said, his tone firm but not unkind. "This isn't healthy. We've both made mistakes, but this can't go on. I've already lost my family because of this. I can't lose anything else." Adam stepped closer, his hands trembling as he pulled a knife from his jacket pocket. The blade glinted under the dim light, and Jonathan's stomach dropped. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Adam shouted, his voice cracking. "I gave up everything for you. I love you." Jonathan raised his hands in a placating gesture, trying to diffuse the situation. "Adam, put the knife down. You're upset, and I get that, but this isn't the answer." But Adam was too far gone. His emotions boiled over, and in a fit of rage he lunged at Jonathan. The two men grappled, their struggle frantic and messy. Jonathan fought to push Adam away, but in the chaos, the knife found its mark. Jonathan gasped as the blade pierced his abdomen, the pain radiating through his body. He staggered backward, clutching the wound as blood seeped through his fingers. Adam froze, his chest heaving as he stared at the blood on his hands. I didn't mean to," he stammered, his voice barely audible. Jonathan collapsed to the ground, his breaths shallow and labored, the life drained from his eyes as he whispered, "You've ruined everything." Panic set in, and Adam fled into the darkness, leaving Jonathan alone in the park. The cold night air carried the faint sound of Jonathan's labored breathing until, finally, it stopped altogether. Under the flickering street lamp, the once respected architect and family man lay lifeless, his secrets and regrets bleeding out onto the ground. The tragedy was complete, and the lives of everyone involved would never be the same.
It was a quiet, foggy morning when a jogger named Rachel stumbled upon a horrifying scene in Crestwood Park. She stopped dead in her tracks, her breath catching as she saw Jonathan Hayes lying motionless under the flickering street lamp. Blood stained the ground around him, stark against the pale frost of the grass. Her panicked 911 call set off a chain of events that would send shockwaves through the town. Within hours, police cordoned off the area, and the serene park transformed into a chaotic crime scene. Detective Alan Hart, a seasoned investigator known for his methodical approach, was assigned to the case. Examining the scene, he noted the signs of a struggle. The trampled grass, a trail of blood leading a few feet away, and a discarded knife nearby. It was clear this wasn't a random attack. As officers canvassed the area, Jonathan's phone was recovered from his jacket pocket. Text messages between him and Adam Carter painted a damning picture. The last message from Adam read, I'll be there at 9. We need to talk. Police tracked Adam down within hours. He was found hiding in his dorm room, visibly shaken and covered in scratches from the struggle. When Detective Hart entered the room, Adam broke down immediately. I didn't mean to kill him, Adam sobbed. It was an accident. He was trying to leave me, and I lost control. His confession stunned the officers. Not only did he admit to the murder, but he also revealed the secret affair that had led to the confrontation. Adam's words, recorded during the interrogation, became the centerpiece of a case that would captivate the entire town. When news of Jonathan's death broke, Crestwood was consumed by grief and disbelief. Jonathan Hayes, the man who had designed some of Crestwood's most iconic buildings, was gone. But when the details of his affair with Adam emerged, the town's reaction turned explosive. Gossip spread like wildfire. At the local diner, whispers filled the air. Can you believe it? Jonathan Hayes having an affair with his daughter's boyfriend. It's disgusting. Poor Lila, poor Martha. Why would he risk everything like that? While some were quick to judge Jonathan, others took a more compassionate stance. People make mistakes, said one neighbor. We don't know what kind of pain he was carrying. But what about Adam? Another replied. He's the one who killed him. The divide in public opinion was sharp. Jonathan's double life and tragic death became a lightning rod for debates about identity, betrayal, and morality. Some saw Jonathan as a victim of a society that forced him to hide his true self, while others condemned him for the pain his secrets caused his family. For Martha Hayes, the humiliation was unbearable. Crestwood was no longer the quaint town where she could walk into the grocery store and exchange pleasantries with neighbors. It had become a place of judgment and whispers behind her back. She packed up the family's belongings, put the house on the market, and left Crestwood within a month. She moved to a small town upstate, hoping for a fresh start, but the scars of betrayal and loss followed her everywhere. Lila, on the other hand, was shattered. Her world had fallen apart in the most unimaginable way. The man she thought she would marry had not only betrayed her, but had also taken her father's life. The emotional weight was unbearable. She deleted her social media accounts, unable to handle the flood of messages. Some supportive, others cruel. She stopped attending her art classes, her once bright future dimmed by the shadow of her family's tragedy. Once her tragedy was cheapered with her business completely shattered again, but once her tragedy was ruined, she was now by fate forever homeless. Desperate for answers and healing, Lila eventually sought therapy. It was in the quiet confines of her therapist's office that she began to process the layers of betrayal and grief. How could they both betray me like that? She often asked, tears streaming down her face. Her therapist gently guided her toward understanding. What happened wasn't your fault, Lila. Your father's choices, Adam's actions, they're not a reflection of you. Healing will take time, but you will get through this. Despite her pain, Leela found small glimmers of hope. She began painting again, pouring her emotions onto the canvas. Each brushstroke was a step toward reclaiming her sense of self. The fallout from Jonathan's murder left no one untouched. Adam's trial loomed on the horizon, promising to dredge up even more painful truths. The Hayes family, once the picture of perfection, had been irrevocably shattered. Crestwood would never forget the scandal, and neither would those who lived through it. But for Lila, Martha, and the rest of the town, one question lingered. Could they ever truly move on from the devastating events that had torn their lives apart? There's a saying in Crestwood, you never truly know what happens behind closed doors. This tragedy brought that truth into sharp focus. Jonathan Hayes was a man many admired, a successful architect, a devoted husband, and a loving father. Yet beneath his polished exterior lay a lifetime of hidden struggles and desires he couldn't reconcile with the life he'd built. Adam Carter, a young man seemingly destined for success, was caught in a web of forbidden love and manipulation. His charm, once seen as endearing, became the key to his undoing. Together, their choices set off a chain reaction that destroyed lives and left an entire town grappling with the aftermath. This story leaves us with painful but important questions. How does one balance personal truth with responsibility to loved ones? How far can betrayal stretch before it snaps into tragedy? The Hayes family's unraveling was not just a result of one secret or one affair. It was the collision of deeply rooted shame, fear, and desperation, a perfect storm of emotions that exploded in the most tragic way. Lila Hayes, now left to rebuild her life, embodies the resilience of those caught in the crossfire of someone else's choices. Her journey reminds us that healing is possible, even in the face of unimaginable betrayal. As we reflect on this heartbreaking story, we are reminded that honesty, while painful, might have been the only path to salvation. Perhaps if Jonathan had felt safe enough to live his truth, or if Adam had made different choices, this tragedy could have been avoided. Now we turn to you. What could have prevented this devastating series of events? Do you think honesty and acceptance could have saved the Hayes family from this fate? Or were they doomed by a society that forced them to hide their true selves? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and this conversation is one that can shed light on the complexities of love, identity, and betrayal. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more gripping and thought-provoking cases. Every week, we bring you stories that challenge what you think you know about love, deception, and the human condition. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that just might leave you questioning everything.